My name is Mark, and for the first 5 years of my marriage, I thought I had it all figured out. I had Sarah, a wife who was as smart and driven as she was beautiful. We had 2 good jobs, a nice apartment downtown that was probably a little too expensive for us, and a joint savings account we lovingly called the Future House Fund, which we fed with religious devotion every month. On paper, we were the perfect team, building a perfect life. I truly believed we were, and I was a good husband. I was a good man, but I was also a good son, and most importantly, a good big brother. I was the first in my family to get a college degree, the first to land a stable corporate job. I was the one who had made it. And with that came a sense of responsibility that I wore like a badge of honor. I was the rock of my family, the one they could always count on, and I was proud of that. I saw no conflict between being a devoted husband to Sarah and being a safety net for my parents and my younger sister, Chloe. In my mind, a good man did both. The friction, when it came to Sarah and me, always boiled down to one thing: my family's definition of a safety net and Sarah's definition of a financial boundary. The primary stress test was always Chloe. My sister is wonderful, charismatic, creative, full of big dreams, but she navigates the world with a blissful ignorance of financial reality. Since we were kids, I was the one who fixed things for her. That dynamic never really changed, it just got more expensive. A few $100s here for a car repair, a loan there to cover her rent when she forgot about it. The loans were never repaid, but that wasn't the point. The point was, you help family. It's just what you do. Sarah didn't see it that way. She didn't grow up with that same all-hands-on-deck mentality. Her family was more self-sufficient. I remember one of our first real fights. I'd just given Chloe $500 to cover a deposit for some new opportunity she was chasing. When Sarah found out, she wasn't yelling, but her quiet disappointment was somehow worse. "Mark, we talked about this," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We agreed to put that money toward the house fund. Chloe is 24 years old. We can't be her personal ATM." "It's not being an ATM, Sarah. It's helping my sister," I argued, feeling a familiar prickle of defensiveness. She was in a tight spot. "She is always in a tight spot," Sarah countered. "And she will be forever as long as she knows you'll just bail her out. I love your sister, but our future, the one we are building, has to come first." I hated when she said things like that. It made her sound cold, unfeeling. It made it seem like she was pitting our future against my family's well-being. Of course our future came first, but what was the point of a beautiful future if you had to leave your family behind to get there? I dropped the argument to keep the peace, but a little piece of resentment took root. She just didn't get it. She didn't understand that my loyalty to my family wasn't a choice. It was a part of who I was. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could be the perfect husband and the perfect brother, keeping both worlds happy. I was a fool to think it could last. The crisis arrived, as it always did with Chloe, in a frantic, tearful phone call. But this time was different. Her dream of being an online boutique owner, funded by a series of small loans and maxed-out credit cards, had spectacularly imploded. She hadn't just run out of money. She was drowning in debt. The inventory she'd bought was sitting in her apartment, unsold. The car I had helped her get a few years back was on the verge of being repossessed, and her landlord was threatening eviction. This wasn't a tight spot. It was a complete collapse. Before I even had time to process the news from Chloe, my mom called. Her voice was thick with panic. "Mark, you have to do something," she pleaded. "Your sister is a mess. We don't know what to do. You're her big brother. You're the only one who can fix this." The familiar weight of their expectations settled onto my shoulders. It was never a question of if I would help, only how. Chloe came over that evening. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, her face pale and puffy from crying. She laid out the whole disaster on our coffee table, a stack of angry red letters from creditors. "I messed up, Mark. I know I did," she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "But I have a plan. The bank said I could get a debt consolidation loan, put it all into one payment. It would save me. But they won't approve me on my own. My credit is shot. I need a cosigner." I felt my stomach clench. This was new territory. This wasn't a few $100s. This was a serious, long-term legal commitment. This was something I couldn't hide from Sarah. I waited until after dinner when we were cleaning up the kitchen to broach the subject. I tried to be calm, to lay out the facts logically, but my voice was tight with anxiety. I explained the situation, the debt, the threat of eviction. I ended by telling her about the consolidation loan, the one solution that could fix everything. "She needs me to co-sign," I said, my eyes fixed on the soapy water, unable to look at her. The clatter of plates stopped. I felt her turn to look at me. When I finally met her gaze, her expression was a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "No, Mark," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was absolute. "Absolutely not. Sarah, please," I begged. "She's going to be on the street. It's the only way." "Is it?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Or is it just the easiest way for everyone to avoid dealing with the real problem? We both know what will happen. You'll co-sign, she'll be fine for a few months, and then she'll miss a payment, and that loan will become our problem. That debt will become our debt." She stepped closer, her voice softening slightly. "Mark, I love your sister, but you've been putting bandages on her problems for years. This time, maybe what she needs isn't a bandage. Maybe helping her, really helping her, means letting her face the consequences of her choices. Maybe hitting rock bottom is the only way she'll finally learn to stand on her own." She reached out and touched my arm. "Think about us. Think about the house. We can't tie our future to her financial mistakes, not again." I pulled my arm away. I didn't hear her wisdom. I didn't hear her concern for our future or even her tough love logic for Chloe. All I heard was a cold, clinical refusal. I heard a woman who would talk about saving for a down payment while my little sister faced eviction. She was my wife, the person who was supposed to be my partner in everything, and she was asking me to turn my back on my own blood. In that moment, she had made it clear. It was either my family, or it was her. I spent the next 2 days in a silent war with Sarah, and an even louder one with myself. Her logic echoed in my head, sensible and infuriating, but it was drowned out by the imagined sound of my sister's life falling apart, and my mother's pleading voice. Sarah saw a financial spreadsheet. I saw my family's tears. In the end, it wasn't even a choice. It was an obligation. On Wednesday, I told Sarah I had to work late. Instead, I drove to the bank and met Chloe. She looked hopeful for the first time in days. As I sat beside a loan officer, signing my name next to hers on documents filled with terrifyingly large numbers and binding legal clauses, I felt a strange mix of dread and righteousness. This was wrong. I knew it was. I was betraying my wife. But as Chloe hugged me tightly in the parking lot afterward, whispering, "Thank you, Mark, you saved me," I pushed the guilt down. I was a good brother. I was a good son. I told myself that made what I was doing okay. I was protecting Sarah from the messy, unpleasant reality of family duty. It was better this way. I would ask for her forgiveness later, once the crisis had passed, rather than ask for her permission now, which I knew she would never give. Living with the secret was poison. I became a stranger in my own home. I was overly cheerful, constantly asking Sarah about her day, offering to cook dinner, suggesting we watch her favorite movies. My guilt manifested as a desperate, cloying niceness. Sarah, who knew me better than anyone, was immediately suspicious. "Is everything okay, Mark?" she asked one night, a few weeks after my trip to the bank. "You've been acting weird." "Weird how?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I'm just happy." She gave me a long, searching look. "Right," she said, unconvinced. The space between us grew, filled with my unspoken lie. The lie came to light on a Saturday. We were sorting through a pile of mail that had accumulated on the kitchen counter. I was on the other side of the room when I saw her pick up a thick, official-looking envelope from the same bank where I had co-signed the loan. My blood ran cold. "What's this?" she asked casually, slitting it open with her thumb. "Looks like something about our savings account." I watched in frozen horror as she pulled out the documents. I saw her brow furrow in confusion, then her eyes widened in disbelief. She read the page, then read it again, her face draining of all color. Finally, she lifted her head and looked at me. The love, the warmth, the partnership that had defined her gaze for 5 years was gone, replaced by the eyes of a stranger, looking at a man she had just discovered she never knew at all. "Mark," she said, her voice a dead, flat whisper. "What did you do?" There was no point in denying it. She held the proof in her hand. The confrontation that followed was not the fiery, screaming match I had dreaded. It was worse. It was a cold, quiet autopsy of our marriage. "You went behind my back," she stated, laying the papers on the counter as if they were evidence at a crime scene. "After I specifically asked you not to. After we discussed it, you looked me in the eye for weeks and lied to me. I did it for my family." The defensive words flew out of my mouth before I could stop them. What was I supposed to do, Sarah? Let Chloe get evicted? I was protecting her. Protecting her. Her voice cracked, a single sharp sound in the silence. Who was protecting me? Who was protecting us? You didn't just co-sign a loan. You tied my future, my financial security, my ability to buy a home, to your sister's irresponsibility. Without my knowledge, without my consent. She took a shaky breath, and the tears I had been expecting finally came, but they were tears of fury, not sadness. "You stood there and listened to all my reasons. You heard me beg you to put our partnership first, and then you deliberately chose to betray it. To betray me." My own defensiveness surged, a shield against the crushing weight of her words. "I can't believe you're being so selfish," I shot back, my voice rising. "This isn't about you. This is about my sister's life falling apart, and you're worried about a down payment. I did what I had to do because you wouldn't stand by me. You forced my hand." In that moment, I truly believed it. In my mind, her refusal to sanction my decision had made my deception necessary. I had cast her as the villain, and I was the beleaguered hero, forced to make a terrible choice. But as I looked at her face, her expression of utter and complete devastation, a small, terrifying thought crept in. What if the villain had been me all along? Check Jundroy. Telefon 4. Motak watching moikwan hekwaha tan ra sa doi bi foibay. Part 4. The Unraveling. The weeks that followed the discovery were a new kind of hell. The explosive anger was gone, replaced by a cold, brittle silence that felt far more permanent. We lived like roommates who disliked each other, communicating only in clipped, necessary sentences. The warmth had vanished from our home, and every glance from Sarah was heavy with a disappointment so profound it felt like a physical weight. I kept telling myself it would get better with time, that she would eventually see I had acted out of love for my family and forgive me. That hope was obliterated exactly 3 months later. It turned out that Sarah's prediction wasn't just logical, it was prophetic. I got a call at work from a number I didn't recognize. It was the bank. Chloe had missed her first payment, then her second. After a series of ignored calls and letters, the bank was now officially turning to the cosigner. To me, the full monthly payment, a sum that made my stomach churn, was now my responsibility. The financial reality crashed down on us immediately. Our future house fund was no longer a source of shared dreams. It became the account I had to drain every month to cover the debt of my sister's failed business. The life we had built was actively being dismantled, one payment at a time. We canceled a vacation we'd been planning for my birthday. Dinners out were replaced with tense meals at home over pasta and cheap sauce. Every small luxury we once enjoyed was now a source of conflict. So we can't afford to go to the movies, but we can afford Chloe's shopping addiction? Sarah asked one night, her voice dripping with a sarcasm so bitter it stung. The arguments became a constant, grinding feature of our existence. They were always about money on the surface, but underneath, they were about the gaping hole where our trust used to be. I started to resent her for being right. Every bank statement, every call from a collections agent was a testament to my catastrophic mistake, and her unforgiving silence was a constant reminder. I felt trapped, and that feeling curdled into a defensive anger. During one particularly bad fight, I did something I knew I shouldn't. I called my parents. I vented my frustrations, but I framed the story carefully. I told them about the financial strain, but I emphasized how difficult and unforgiving Sarah was being about the whole thing. Their reaction was predictable, and exactly what my bruised ego wanted to hear. "She's your wife, Mark," my mother said, her voice full of misguided sympathy. "She should be supporting you through this, not making you feel worse. She just doesn't understand what family means." My dad agreed, adding that Sarah was always a bit uptight about money. Their words were a balm to my pride, but they were poison to my marriage. I had taken our private failure and outsourced the blame. When I spoke to Sarah later, I had a renewed sense of righteousness, armed with my parents' validation. I started using their language, telling her she didn't understand family, that she was being cold. I saw the look on her face as I said it. It was a look of dawning, painful clarity. She finally understood that she wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting my entire family system, a system that enabled irresponsibility and demanded loyalty above all else. And she knew, in that moment, that her own husband was not on her team. He was on theirs. The battle was over. She was no longer fighting for our marriage, she was simply enduring it, a stranger in her own home, waiting for the end. Chak Chandroy. De la fan phim fan getok kokochiet, motas subdo kuikung vahokwa kedang. Part 5. The End of the Line and the Bitter Aftermath. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet death of a dream. After 6 months of draining our savings to pay for Chloe's loan, I sat down with our finances. The numbers didn't lie. The future house fund was gone. There was no path forward. That evening, I had to tell Sarah. I've run the numbers, I said, avoiding her eyes. With the loan payments, there's just no way. The house dream is over, Sarah, at least for a long time. I think a part of me expected her to cry, to yell, to show some kind of passionate response. Instead, she was unnervingly calm. She simply nodded, as if I were confirming something she had already known for months. It was never about the house, Mark, she said, her voice soft and full of a sad, weary finality. It was about what the house represented. A partnership, a future that was ours, a commitment that we were each other's primary family. She finally looked at me, and there was no anger in her eyes, only a profound sense of closure. I can't live like this anymore. I can't be in a marriage where I come second to your family's crises. I can't be with a man whose first loyalty isn't to me. It's not a competition I want to win. It's a partnership I realize I never truly had. What are you saying? I asked, a cold dread washing over me. I'm saying I'm done, she said, her voice clear and steady. I'm leaving. I can't build a life on a foundation that you shattered. I tried to argue, to call her selfish for giving up when things got hard, but the words felt hollow. She wasn't making a threat. She was stating a fact. Her decision had already been made. That weekend, while I sat numbly on the sofa, she packed her things. The apartment we had built together was methodically and quietly dismantled, box by box. When she walked out the door for the last time, she didn't look back. The aftermath was brutal. The divorce was quick, a clean cut. I was left with the full weight of Chloe's debt, a constant, crushing reminder of my choices. I had to move out of our expensive apartment and into a smaller, depressing one-bedroom place. My dream of homeownership was a distant, laughable memory. My relationship with my own family, the one I had sacrificed everything for, became strained. The initial gratitude from my parents and Chloe faded, replaced by an awkward tension. My heroic act was no longer a topic of conversation. It was just a monthly financial burden that I started to resent. When I tried to talk to them about the strain, they would get defensive. I had chosen to help, hadn't I? The camaraderie of crisis was gone, leaving only the tedious reality of debt. About a year after she left, I saw her on a mutual friend's social media feed. There was a group photo from a dinner party, and Sarah was standing next to a new guy, laughing. She looked incredible, relaxed, radiant, and genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. A few months after that, they posted their own photos from a trip to Italy. 6 months after that, they announced their engagement with a picture of them standing on the porch of a small, charming house they had just bought together. The house. A wave of injustice so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me hit me. I had lost everything, and she was living the life that was supposed to be ours. I still tell myself that I did what any good son, any good brother would have done. I chose family. Sarah was the one who couldn't handle that. She was the one who was inflexible, who couldn't understand that loyalty sometimes requires sacrifice. She wanted a husband who would put her before his own blood, and I just wasn't built that way. I was punished for my own decency. She's happy now with a man who probably has no family obligations, no messy human connections to deal with. It must be easy. She got her perfect house and her simple life, and I was left with the consequences of having a heart. In the end, I suppose she got what she wanted. and I was left with the knowledge that I had done the right thing, even if it cost me everything. I landed on Jessica's doorstep like a refugee from a war I had started. I was a storm of righteous fury and tear-streaked mascara, dragging my suitcase behind me. I left him, I announced, the words tasting like victory. I'm finally free. Jessica played her part perfectly. She ushered me in, wrapped me in a hug, and immediately opened a bottle of wine. We sat on her plush velvet sofa as I recounted my version of the final fight. A dramatic monologue where I was the brave visionary, and Leo was the fearful antagonist who had delivered the final betrayal. Jessica hung on every word, shaking her head in disgust at all the right moments. Good for you, she said, topping off my glass. You are so much better off. He was dragging you down, I saw it for months. For that one night, fueled by cheap Chardonnay and her unwavering validation, I felt powerful. I felt right. That feeling lasted less than a week. The official death of Elysian came not with a bang, but with a pathetic whimper, in the form of a group email from Julian. The subject line was, "The journey forward." But the content was a short, jargon-filled eulogy for our dead company. The final potential investor had pulled out. It was over. The money was gone. My title as founding partner evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a gaping hole in my resume and a mountain of credit card debt. I had torched my entire life for a company that didn't even exist anymore. The shift in Jessica's apartment was almost immediate. I was no longer the heroic friend making a brave escape. I was the unemployed roommate sleeping on her sofa bed, my possessions slowly encroaching on her meticulously decorated living room. Her sympathetic questions about Leo were replaced with pointed inquiries about my job search. Her offers of wine were replaced with passive-aggressive comments about how expensive groceries were. The friendship that had been so thrilling when it was just gossiping about my unsupportive boyfriend couldn't withstand the mundane reality of my failure. I could feel her patience wearing thin, and I started to resent her for it, for not being the unconditional ally I thought she was. Reality hit me like a physical blow. I had to go crawling back to the corporate world I had so arrogantly dismissed. The job hunt was a masterclass in humility. Recruiters would look at the 6-month gap on my resume and the defunct startup, and their smiles would tighten. I was no longer a rising star. I was a risk. After dozens of rejections, I finally landed a marketing manager position at a small, uninspired insurance company. It was a step down from the job I'd had before Elysian, and the pay was significantly less.